Australia is not particularly known for good public transport. We only have one electrified long-distance railway, and although most major cities have rail systems, there are still major problems. In this video, I'm going to be looking at all of Australia's major suburban rail systems, those being Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide and Perth. I will rate each system in 5 categories and overall, those being size, connectivity, frequency, reliability and future expansion. Hi, I'm Tasmanian and this is Australia's Odd Railway Systems. This is how my rating system works. Every system gets a rating out of 25, 5 points from each attribute. The ratings are for size, how many lines, and how many people does it serve. Connectivity, how well does the network connect with regional trains, buses, trams, and airports. Frequency, how many trains are running at any time, and how long will you have to wait for your train. Reliability, how likely is it your train will be delayed or cancelled. And future expansion, are there plans for new lines or extensions? Now we will start to look at every system, in order from least to most populated city. One, Adelaide. Adelaide, with a population of 1.5 million, is the state capital of South Australia. Is situated on the River Torrens with the ocean to the west and the Adelaide Hills to the east. It has 7 railway lines arranged into 4 groups. These groups are the Western, Outer Harbour, Port Dock and Grange, Northern, Gawler and Gawler Central, Eastern, Belair, and Southern, Seaford and Flinders. There is also the Glenelg tram, operated by Adelaide Metro. The network runs on frequencies varying between 15 and 30 minutes between trains. This can be considered a poor frequency for a major city. Adelaide is the only city in Australia to have a diesel suburban commuter railway. The Belair and Western services run on diesel, while the Northern and Southern services are electrified. The most used line is the Gawler line, connecting Gawler Central with Adelaide. The worst frequency at any station is North Adelaide, with a train every 3 hours. Quasi has a good video on this, as well as other weird stations in Adelaide. The main station of the Adelaide Railway network is Adelaide Station, located at the northern end of the CBD. The system has alright connectivity, with one major flaw. This is Adelaide Parkland Station, where the Garn, Indian Pacific, Overland and Great Southern all arrive. It, despite being beside the corridor carrying the Belair, Seaford and Flinders lines, does not connect with any form of public transport. Adelaide Airport also does not have a connection to the rail or tram networks. Reliability is where the network does well, with a 96.7% reliability as of 2022. There are plans for a lot of extensions in the Adelaide network, the biggest of which is Seaford to Aldinga Beach, Belair to Mount Barker, and Gorford Central to Concordia or Tanunda. Now, my ratings for Adelaide. I give it a 3 out of 5 for size, 2 out of 5 for connectivity, 2 out of 5 for frequency, 5 out of 5 for reliability, and 4 out of 5 for future expansion. Two, Perth. Perth has a population of about 2.5 million. It is situated on the banks of the Swan River, about 10 kilometres from the ocean. Perth has 7 railway lines, which can be broken up into 2 main groups. There are the older lines with short station gaps, as being the Armidale and Thornley lines, Midland Line, and Fremantle line. Then there are the newer lines, the Yanchep, Mandurah and Airport lines. These are soon to be joined by the Ellendale line, branching from Bayswater on the Midland and Airport lines to Ellendale in the northern suburbs. Perth's older lines are characterised by short gaps between stations and plentiful level crossings. Its newer lines often feature freeway median alignments and giant gaps between stations. At one point, there was a gap of 23 kilometres between Warnbro and Mandurah stations on the Mandurah line. Perth's rail network has an approximate of 96.5% of trains on time. Just like Adelaide, this can be considered very good. Train frequencies vary between every 5 and every 30 minutes, depending on the time and line. The network covers a lot of Perth, and with 2 new lines to open in the coming years, as well as extensions, it seems Perth does know how to run trains. The flaws with TransPerth, however, are still there. The massive gaps on the newer lines, specifically the Mandurah and Yanchep lines, are still very large, meaning park and rides are very common. This is an inefficient way of creating railways and means that a lot of stations in major areas are not surrounded by transit-oriented development or apartments. This means patronage is not as high as it could be if TODs were built around more frequently. Perth has been undergoing a lot of major public transport infrastructure projects. The extension of the Joondalup line to Yanchep opened earlier this year, 2024, and the Armidale and Thornley lines are being entirely rebuilt to remove level crossings. This will also include rail extensions from Thornley to Coburn Central and from Armidale to Byford. The line will be rebuilt on a viaduct for part of the line, and currently the Armidale line temporarily terminates at Victoria Park. Perth's CBD is served by 5 train stations. These are Claisebrook, McIver, City West, Elizabeth Quay and Perth Station. Perth Station also featured a sub-station called Perth Underground, where the Yanchep and Mandurah lines stop. Now, my ratings. I'll give it a 4 out of 5 for size, 4 out of 5 for connectivity, 3 out of 5 for frequency, 5 out of 5 for reliability, and 5 out of 5 for future expansion. Brisbane. Brisbane also has a similar population to Perth and is located on the shores of the Brisbane River. It is the state capital of Queensland. Brisbane has 12 railway lines, including 2 lines that can be considered intercity. Brisbane has an interesting layout where trains on 2 different lines almost always through run. The pairs for through running are Ipswich to Sunshine Coast, Ferny Grove to Beenleigh, Cleveland to Shorncliffe, and Springfield to Redcliffe Peninsula, with the Rosewood and Dooman lines generally running separately. The Brisbane network is run fully by electrified EMUs. Frequencies vary between every 10 during peak hour and every 30 off-peak. The main terminal of the network is Roma Street, while New South Wales TransLink services to Sydney, as well as Queensland Rail travel train services towards Cairns, Longreach and Charleville depart. Despite the name, Central Station is not the main station of the network. It is actually in the centre of the Brisbane CBD. Brisbane has also a ferry network, as well as a metro. Definitely not a fancy bus. Definitely. Anyways, their big fancy bus that just opened also connects to the main rail network at Roma Street, South Bank, Burunda and Boggo Road. The Brisbane Metro has often been questioned for its name. Brisbane has a lot of proposed future railway lines. Some of these are Springfield Central to Ipswich via Ripley, Varsity Lakes to Coolangatta via Gold Coast Airport, Biawa to Maroochydore via Caloundra, and the almost complete Cross River Railway, the main infrastructure project creating a tunnel from Bogo Road Station to Exhibition Station, passing under the Brisbane River and the CBD. This will have stops at Wollongabba for the Gabba Stadium, Albert Street for the south of Brisbane CBD, Roma Street as an interchange with the main network, and Exhibition to serve the exhibition facilities to the north of Brisbane. It will carry the Sunshine Coast and Redcliffe Peninsula lines, and the Gold Coast and Beenleigh lines. Brisbane will be holding the 2032 Olympic Games, and a large amount of rail infrastructure will most likely be built for this. The main possibility for a railway line dedicated for the Olympics will be a duplication and extension of the Doombend line from Doombend to North Shore Hamilton, the location where the Olympic Village will be located, as well as a lot of new high-density development. Now, rating Brisbane. I would easily give Brisbane a 3 out of 5 for size, 3 out of 5 for connectivity, a 2 out of 5 for frequency, and a 5 out of 5 for future expansion. Four. Sydney. Sydney was, until recently, the largest city in Australia. However, due to some adjustment of census boundaries, Melbourne overtook a few years ago. Sydney has arguably the most impressive public transport network in the country. There are 9 railway lines arranged in a numerical format from T1 to T9. The city runs all train services with its iconic double-decker trains. Sydney also has recently opened the Sydney Light Rail, comprising of 3 lines across the city and inner suburbs. Sydney's trains share their tracks with New South Wales Trainlink, intercity and regional services. The main station of the network is Central, located at the southern end of Sydney CBD. Sydney's Central Business District is served by the City Circle, which carries the T2, T3 and T8 lines. The T1 and T9 run along the western side of the loop while crossing the harbour bridge onto the north shore. T4 services use the section between Central and Town Hall before using the eastern suburbs line to pass beneath the CBD, stopping at Martin Place. The new Sydney Metro City also passes under the CBD, stopping at Barongaroo, Martin Place, Gadigal and Central. Finally, CBD and South East Light Rail, which opened in 2019, runs from the iconic Circular Quay down George Street to Central and beyond. Sydney's Metro, which has often been considered Australia's largest transit project, currently runs from Tallawong in the northwest of Sydney to Sydenham, south of the CBD. The network will soon be expanded with the opening of the Metro Western Sydney Airport, linking St Mary's in the far west of Sydney with the new Western Sydney Airport in the Bradfield precinct, as well as the South West Metro and Metro West linking inner and central suburbs of Sydney with the precinct of the city. The South West Metro is a world-first conversion of a 19th century railway into an automatic rapid transit system. Sydney's Airport Rail Link was the first airport rail link in the country, looking at you, Melbourne, and services stations at Green Square, Mascot, Domestic, International and Walleye Creek. T8 services to the city and Macarthur stop there. Domestic and international stations have an access surcharge. Sydney, unlike all the other stations I've discussed so far, has a reliable intercity rail network surrounding it, services to major New South Wales cities such as Newcastle, Wollongong, Bathurst, Mindy River and Maroolin. Sydney's trains are not as reliable as other cities, however, as according to their website, only 76% of trains arrived on time on the 14th of November, the most recent data available as of editing. Sydney's public transport covers the majority of the city, the only major gaps being the eastern suburbs and the northern beaches. The network is frequent, with the only poor frequencies being on the Richmond line, the only single-track suburban line. Sydney overall is a good transit system, and I will give it a 5 out of 5 for size, 4 out of 5 for connectivity, 4 out of 5 for frequency, 3 out of 5 for reliability, and 5 out of 5 for future expansion. Five, Melbourne. Finally, we're here. Melbourne, the city that, because of some fiddling with census boundaries, became the largest city in the country. It has a massive rail network, as well as its famous tram network, the largest in the world. Melbourne, because of the way it organises its railway lines, has 17 railway lines, with all but one entering the CBD. It organises these lines into 4 groups, comprising the Burnley Group, for Alamein, Belgrave, Lilydale and Glen Waverley lines, the Caulfield Group, the East Pakenham and Cranbourne services, the Cross City Group, with Stony Point, Frankston, Werribee and Williamstown services, and the Northern Group, the Craigieburn, Sunbury and Upfield services. The system can lead to a lot of confusion with the amount of stopping patterns on some routes. Melbourne, as I mentioned before, has the world's largest tram network, which is seamlessly connected with the heavy rail networks. The main problem with the tram network is the lack of dedicated right-of-ways compared to on-street running. The trains run entirely with single-deck trains, the majority of which are Siemens, Cummings and Extrapolis trains. The network has much poorer frequencies than Sydney, with some lines having frequencies every 30 minutes off-peak. The network is fairly reliable, with 93% of trains arriving on time, still nothing compared to Adelaide. Melbourne's main railway stations are Flinders Street and Southern Cross. Flinders Street is the main hub for suburban services, while Southern Cross is the main terminal for regional services operated by V-Line, as well as the New South Wales train link XPT from Sydney. Melbourne's CBD is served by the aforementioned stations, as well as the City Loop, an underground railway line with 3 stations under the northern and eastern parts of the CBD. Next year, the Melbourne Metro tunnel will open, with new stations in the city at Town Hall and State Library. Melbourne recently opened a new rail extension, an extension of the Pakenham line to East Pakenham. This went virtually unnoticed, besides by rail enthusiasts who had a field day. Melbourne also has been undergoing a major infrastructure project related to its railways, the Level Crossing Removal Project, designed to remove all level crossings across the state of Victoria and starting in Melbourne. This has resulted in a lot of elevated and modernised railway stations along heritage lines. The other major project related to the railways in Melbourne is the Suburban Rail Loop. This is a 3-stage line set to create the largest infrastructure project in Australia if it is completed. It will create a loop around Melbourne's railway lines, linking its numerous branch lines. It will run from Cheltenham on the Frankston line to Werribee on the Werribee line, via Box Hill, Broadmeadows and Melbourne Airport. And by the way, we don't talk about the airport rail link. We don't. Anyways, one final problem with Melbourne's rail network is that it shares a lot of tracks with the V-Line suburban trains and regional trains. This means V-Line services can get stuck behind suburban trains on shared lines. Access to Melbourne Airport is difficult using public transport. The Sky Bus is the only advertised way, which costs a fortune, and the only other way is by the 901 Smart Bus to Broadmeadows Railway Station, then Craigieburn line trains to the City Loop. Overall, Melbourne's rail network is nice, but somewhat strange. And we get a 5 out of 5 for size, 4 out of 5 for connectivity, 3 out of 5 for frequency, 4 out of 5 for reliability, and 4 out of 5 for future expansion. Before we end this video, I would like to give an honourable mention to other smaller cities with railway lines, those being Newcastle and Canberra. They both have singular light rail lines and extensive bus networks. Anyways, thank you for watching this rather long video about every suburban railway system in Australia, and I will see you next time on Tasmanian.